Hi, everyone, and welcome to Backtracking Students' Lived Experiences and Data Using Institutional Research. My name is Faye Jones. I'm a faculty researcher at Florida State University, and I'm presenting on behalf of the Backtracking research team at FSU. And also, live on the chat is Dr. Richard Burnett. All of you know him probably as Rick, Associate Provost for Strategy and Interim CIO at FSU. So feel free to ask questions via chat. And Rick and I will answer as many questions as we can. And so let's get started. Okay, so today we will demonstrate the backtracking technique, and we're going to share an overview, discuss our mixed method approach, and how to collect student pathway data using the backtracking technique. We'll also describe our data analysis process based on pilot interviews that we've just recently conducted, and illustrate individual pathway identification and pathway aggregation using the technique. We'll also provide some final thoughts, and hopefully if we don't answer all your questions throughout the presentation, perhaps at the end we might have a few more minutes as well. Okay, so this is basically our conceptual framework. The backtracking technique, it has three layers or phases, if you will. Layer one is our institutional research college data, and we begin by pulling cohort data and contact information, transfer information, alumni demographics, academic history, and you can even go way back to high school entry data if that's something that you want to collect. But of course, we have to also pull the filtering type variables, etc. The contact information from layer one is used then in layer two, right? And that is our alumni survey type questions where we ask students about employment history, like job title, company, salary, job location, and other related questions about their jobs. Layer one and two are primarily quantitative, right? And then in layer three, we take information from the previous two layers and we use that to inform our alumni interviews. Layer three is qualitative in nature, and we use that to extract rich text about students' experiences. Finally, data analysis, it involves identification of individual pathways and also the integration of the pathways along with model generation or creation. And so now we're going to talk about each of these layers in a little bit more detail. Okay, so layer one, we know as the IR and college data layer. So institutional research really does give backtracking an edge in data collection. Extraction of IR data prior to surveying, right, or interviewing former students is key because it gives us insight into students' experiences before we interview them. For example, IR can inform us about coursework, like failed courses or low grades, drops in GPA, withdrawals from courses, before we interview a student. And we then gain insight into financial difficulties, things like periods of enrollment, changes in major, completion rates, and so much more. So if we look, for example, at the snippet that's provided of one student's IR data from the pilot, in red, you'll see that after the first semester, this student did not re-enroll for an entire year. And you'll see that in these red circles here, fall 2013 and fall 2014. And that the student also experienced a change in major during this period, as shown by the blue circles, right? Women's studies to ICT, or information, communication, and technology. The student also withdrew from the courses that she had in her first semester, and we see that in the yellow squares. And then again, it basically points to IR informing us about these specific data points and channeling us to look at these areas for more detailed observation later. Also, let's look at another IR tidbit, right? Another snippet we pulled, and we see here a change in major in conjunction with academic probation, right? As signified by the GPA, an increase in GPA, a change in major, And so we'll see here that there was also proof that the degree was awarded. So that's always great to note. And so you see here again, the way that we can look at student pathways through the lens of institutional research. Layer two involves our alumni transfer and employment data. So how do we locate alumni, right? We remember that we collected IR data in layer one. Well, now we use that information to contact our graduates, right? We also have ways to capture them through LinkedIn and reach them by phone if absolutely necessary. In the alumni survey, we focus on graduates' employment data. Is the graduate employed full-time? Are they employed in their field? And are they currently pursuing an advanced degree? If so, in what, right? We really want to dig deeper into their experiences. Of course, you can always use alumni survey results to capture outcomes data, right? Perhaps identify where students are employed, how far they've traveled from where they graduated, even create different graphics for salary data. The map presented here charts the 3 students in our pilot when we were using Google Maps. And then the 2 in green are employed, the 1 in red is unemployed, and the black flag is the institution that they all graduated from. So layer 2 has additional benefits that for tracking student employment outcomes. And so far we have the IR data, we have the employment data, and now let's see what comes next. And remember, we talked about pathway explanatory data. Okay, so again, backtracking is truly about understanding students' lived experiences, right? What hindrances did they have on their way to accomplishing their graduation goal, and how did they overcome these obstacles or setbacks? For example, did personal issues arise, financial situations, difficulty with courses? Also, we want to know about the good things that happened to them, right? The facilitators, did they have mentors? Did they participate in clubs? Were they a part of any experiential learning activities, etc. So again, guided by institutional research, we have a better way to identify influencers, hindrances, and critical junctures. And critical junctures are basically these stopping points that students might have, right? When students feel or felt like that had they not dealt with this issue, this dire need, they would not have been able to continue. So it's one of those junctures where they're at a crossroads and they need to move forward by dealing with that situation. Otherwise, nothing more can happen, right? So we term that a critical juncture. So some interview questions you might ask when conducting an IR informed inquiry. And let's just look at course taking, for example. You might ask, now that you know some information about the student, I see that you retook course X in semester Y in year Z, right? What approach did you take to pass it the second time, right? The next time that you took the course? Or perhaps a question related to major or degree. Let's say, why did you change from major X to major Y? Explain a little bit more about your process and what you were thinking at that time, right? So we don't need to know that they changed majors. We know they did that, but now we get to ask why. And that's critical when we're trying to go deeper into their experiences. And a lot of times we're helping them remember something that perhaps they didn't want to remember. So we've already conducted an initial pilot, right? Remember that this project began last August of 2020. So we are in a piloting phase before the full launch. We targeted 10 African-American students. 5 agreed to the interviews, and 3 alumni stories are going to be shared today. 2 from African-American men. We've got pseudonyms for them, Robert and Aaron, and 1 African-American woman, pseudonym Christy, all with an IT or computing BS degree. And then 2 of the 3 have an AA from a community college. So we just really are going to share the upper division undergraduate with you the last 2 years, just to simplify the pathway for now. Data analysis. Let's talk a little bit about this. Remember that this is a mixed method, and this is important to understand that now we're taking information from each of those layers and building stories behind each of these students, right? So I'll give you an example of what we might consider a critical juncture versus a hindrance versus a facilitator. In blue, you'll see examples of these critical junctures, right? Withdrawing from courses, right, in that 1 year. And let's just share that semester one for Christy. She withdrew from all of her courses 1 year. In that year or semester, she found out that she was a diabetic, and she indeed entered into a diabetic coma. So that pretty much put a stop on many things for her. Semester three, she had an ICT. She was in the women's studies, right? And then she changed majors to ICT. Sometimes that change in major can be critical for students, especially if they're on the bubble of academic probation or not, right? They're trying to change now their lives sometimes, and they really do take that very seriously. And it can also be detrimental to many when they're going through those changes. Others, not so much, right? So we also have hindrances in red. And sometimes you'll see those as feeling sick, perhaps Robert in semester four having family issues. Family, can cause stress. Again, medical issues. And look at semester one, not being prepared for coursework, such as programming work that many students might need to complete, or perhaps calculus and things that maybe they have not done yet. Sometimes they just don't feel prepared. Those are hindrances. And so we might also look at facilitators, such as scholarships or competitive internships, belonging to special clubs or groups, having a teaching assistantship, experiential learning opportunities. And so we want you to see here that you'll see these combinations of data in these layers. And what we're going to do now is I'd like to have you see the demonstration of how we were aggregating or are aggregating and synthesizing these student pathways. Dr. Marsha Martis will now illustrate how we originally thought of this and how this is leading us to where we are today. So we hope you will appreciate where we're taking this in these next couple of years. Move this here so that you can see.
So once we've collected our qualitative and quantitative data, we can begin charting individual pathways and looking for commonalities. So let's give ourselves some time span here. So the interviews covered 7 semesters for 2 participants and 6 semesters for 1 participant. 2 were transfers, that's why, and 1 was a traditional undergraduate 4-year student. So what we're going to do is give our transfers an extra semester right off the top here. And then we have approximately 2 years of 3 semesters each. And this is when they enter. This is where they exit. And we know we've got year 1 here. We've got year 2 here. And so for our transfer students, we have semesters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. And for our undergraduate student, traditional student, we have semesters 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And so these are our AAA students, and this is our traditional undergraduate student. So one of the other things that we're charting is also the high points and the low points in their academic career. So let's give ourselves kind of a cutoff line right about there. Okay, let's take, for example, our first participant, Christy, and she's the only woman among our participants. And so from Christy's IR data, we can tell that she was admitted after transferring from community college, but withdrew all of from in all of her courses in her first semester. So we can just kind of give her a kind of a stop there. But there was almost a 1-year delay between Christy's first semester and her second semester. So we're going to just give some dotted lines here. And here's Christy's second semester. So in her second semester, we saw that she declared an ICT major and passed her math courses with some fairly low grades. But in her third semester, her grades improved slightly. But in her fourth semester, she withdrew from a course, so that's another dotted line. However, in semesters 5 and 6, her grades continued to improve, and she graduated in semester 7 with a 3.3 GPA. 3.3. Okay, from our interview then with Christy, we learned that her initial delay was due to a serious medical condition, and this was a real critical juncture in her education. Her medical condition also affected her work in semesters 3 and 4, causing the other withdrawal and low grades. So we learned that Christy decided to change her major to ICT in the second semester because she felt like she could pass those courses and they seemed more interesting to her. And to that extent, the curriculum was really a facilitator. And so Christy credits her improved GPA in semesters 5 and 6 to joining an IT club, working with a faculty mentor, and getting an IT job. Christy credits her post-graduation employment to these facilitators, and unfortunately, she was recently laid off due to COVID-19, but we'll give her an E for employee. Now let's turn to Robert. And from Robert's IR data, he's our other transfer student, we can see that he transferred from a community college but received low grades after his first bachelor semester. So we'll start him in kind of around here. In semester 2, his grades improved, but they were low still. But in semester 3, Robert changed his major to ICT. And in semester 4, Robert did well in some courses and not well in others. But his grades did improve in semesters 5, 6, and 7. And so Robert graduated with a 2.8 GPA. So in our interview with Robert, we learned that he had no programming background and quickly fell behind in his IT courses. And so that's something that we really have to note as a hindrance. And although he tried to keep up, by semester 3, he decided to change his major to ICT because he was also dealing with another major stressor in his life, which was an HIV diagnosis. So he's dealing with that as well. And the reason why his grades were so uneven in semester 4 is because he was dealing with some family stress related to that diagnosis. But things began to even out by semester 5, and he got a part-time IT job and faculty mentoring for his personal and professional issues. He credits his improving grades and completion to this support. And Robert initially had 2 jobs after graduation, working 2 jobs at the same time, but those jobs eventually landed him a single IT job with a decent salary. So now let's turn to our final participant, Aaron. And so from the interview data, we learned that Aaron was a traditional student who declared IT major in the first semester of his junior year, and his GPA was 3.4. So we can start Aaron right about here. However, Aaron changed his major to computer science in the second semester of his junior year, and his grades remained strong um, in semesters 3 through 6, and he graduated with a 3.8 GPA. And so from our interview, we learned that Aaron changed majors because he wanted more challenging courses and he felt that computer science majors had better earning potential. He also received a Rotary Housing Scholarship that gave him the time and resources to focus on doing well in his challenging computer science coursework. And so his strong academic performance yielded him a competitive internship in semester 3, which led him to join the Black Network Code 2040 group. And so his continually strong grades and campus connections yield him a competitive computer science teaching assistant role in semesters 5 and 6. Aaron reported that the TA-ship, the Code 2040 group, and his internship gave him a big network and lots of opportunities to excel in job interviews. And so as a result, he is now a software engineer in Silicon Valley, making over $100,000 a year. So when we map all these pathways against each other, a few things stand out. ICT majors can be a good choice for students who are interested in applied aspects of technology, like social media. And this may be true for other CTE students who enter in one specialization, but really may be better off in another. And so that early intervention can make a real difference. Even with daunting challenges like medical conditions and family stress, students can maintain and improve their academic performance if they are guided to the right academic programs in time. Faculty mentors and outside classroom experiences can be absolutely pivotal in keeping students focused on degree completion and in-field employment. And networking opportunities tend to yield more networking opportunities, and these connections can be leveraged throughout a student's experience. So this is an example of how pathways look in an offline way. Online, these will all be mapped and the commonalities will begin to emerge, and we will be able to delve deeper and figure out where effective interventions can be placed and what those interventions might be.
Awesome. So
Stop. Big banks are lying.
So much, Marcia, for that. And what you're able to see there was kind of the thought that went behind that of how we were going to aggregate those pathways. And sometimes you just need a sketching board to try to figure it out and piece it together before you start, putting things into some other type of software. And so this is really the time where we started to speak with Rick and asking him, based on some of these ideas, how we might want to integrate that, right? How we might want to integrate IR with the thoughts we were having as it relates to visualization and output. And he suggested Power BI. We're already BI users. And so we started looking at possibilities with Power BI. And so now let's review one of the graphics that we've started to put together. Now, mind you, these are my graphics, and I've started just recently in Power BI, so I have not yet even gotten to the more advanced usage that Rick and his team have, but clearly he's going to be working with us so that we can enhance these. And again, we've only been doing this for several months now, and so we're really excited about the full outcome. So in this chart, we see upper division student overall GPAs by semester for all 10 of the African-American students that we piloted, each in a different color. And we can see stops, right? We can see restarts, and we can see GPAs that kind of plummeted. Let's take a look at Christy, right, in dark blue. The IR data showed us that she started and had to withdraw from all of her courses. then she restarted and finished her IT degree. Remember Aaron, which we knew was a rock star from the beginning. He's up there in blue. And so he did well from the beginning and even graduated early in the 6 semesters instead of 7, which the others graduated in, or most of them did anyway. Also, take a look at Robert, who struggled with those life issues and the HIV diagnosis that Marcia was talking about. Certainly he went through a lot, but he also finished, and he's showing in the green. And we even see a young lady, Jill, who started out up there with Aaron, right? But she dropped and has not come back. Okay. And this was a result of staying in one major and then the GPA dropping and dropping. And then she got into academic issues, and then she did not return, or we have not seen her back at FSU. So again, different things going on with students. Now, let's look at student outcomes, right? Here we layer outcomes that we hope to see among STEM students and completers. So let's look first that students had a good academic performance, right? That's the GPA in gray, that they graduated, right? That's in garnet, that they're employed, that we see that in purple, and hopefully in their fields in yellow. This is particularly important in STEM fields when we need students of color to diversify the workplace and add perspective, right? We know that we have gaps to fill as it relates to underrepresented minorities. Let's then look far right. We see Jill and Derek. They did not finish their degrees, right? Jill is not working in field, and Derek is working as an electronics repairman. So I considered him working somewhat in field, right? But they each make a little over 20,000 per year. Now we look at all the garnets. Those are actual graduates, and Christy sticks out like a sore thumb. She's right here, right? And so that's because she does not have a job. And remember, we told you that that she lost her job during the pandemic. So we hope to see that improve, hopefully a couple of years when we see or are able to do another alumni survey. We hope that that will improve then. Let's look at next, Melissa, right? She's right here. And she has a fairly high GPA. And so we're wondering what was going on there. And she graduated with a BSIT and is employed with a relatively lower salary compared to the others. And what we know about that is that she's actually a graduate student pursuing her master's now in a GA position. And so I'd like to see what her salary is going to look like after she gets her master's. Or perhaps if we see a lot of these, right, that might be an opportunity to look at what GAs make, right, and pay, and making policy decisions based on this, and what, determining whether some of these factors might help or hinder in the retainment of students of color in these fields. Because if you know that you can get 20 or 30,000 more initially from just going into the field as opposed to continuing on your education, that's something that we might want to consider and look at, especially if we have evidence that it's happening a lot. So these are types of things where these data can be meaningful for decision making. Let's see here. Jessica is right there with Erin, but she did not obtain a job related to her major. So we're kind of looking at that as a reason or a possible justification for that. Robert, you see Robert, and that's interesting. This is the student that had a 2.8 GPA that is now an IT manager in West Palm Beach. And had to handle a medical condition, but as it relates to all the other students, he is actually second highest compared to Aaron as it relates to salary, right? So that is also an indicator that there may be other things happening where the GPA may not be the end all be all when it comes to employment and salary, right? There are other things that certainly are looked at that can improve your employability. Of course, Aaron is a software analyst in Silicon Valley. And but we want to know more, right? These are the outcomes. And now let's look a little bit deeper at the facilitators. So when we compared Aaron and Robert's facilitators by semester, We also added the GPA as a reminder to keep us on track of where they were academically in their performance. But let's check out Aaron, right? He had challenging coursework the entire time, scholarships, which helped him remain financially stable, plus, of course, a housing scholarship. It's always great to have a scholarship where you live. Internships, which is a form of experiential learning in his field, which that helps him become familiarized with the field, comfortable working in that atmosphere. And even in the seventh semester after he graduated, he was in an internship. And by the way, the last internship was in Silicon Valley, and they offered him a job. Okay, and that is where he is now in that six-figure job. So in semester 6 in Orange, he was a TA selected to teach a course as an undergraduate student with a bachelor's. He participated in STEM clubs, had faculty mentors, had mostly jobs in his major, found networking opportunities right now with peers, with those he felt were culturally competent, engaged, understanding him and who he was as an African American male. So he became a member of the Black Network Code 2040 group. So he was consistent, right, and successful at identifying and engaging in these activities, and also efforts that facilitated his employability. In comparison, Robert didn't participate in any facilitators until his last 3 semesters or his senior year. And certainly that had an impact, but I am glad to see that he at least pushed hard toward the end. And usually juniors and seniors do that because they know they're close to the end and they want to get that employment opportunity solidified. And so in the last 3 semesters, he did participate in a STEM club, was working with a faculty mentor to help him, had a good job in his major, and networked quite a bit, right, with career fairs and other campus opportunities to meet employers. But of course, we want to look at not just the good, but we've got to take a look at the bad and the ugly and see what students might have done, right? Maybe the combination of the facilitators and the hindrances and the balancing, sometimes the hindrances are overwhelming, right? And they take over. So it may be that some students are not able to adjust, but it certainly is good to look at this on a semester by semester basis. So let's look at the bad and ugly. Let's look at Aaron first, and remember that just because you have good grades doesn't mean that you don't have hindrances that impact your life. So Aaron said he experienced problems with anxiety and his ADHD condition. He felt that he had to work a lot harder to be considered good, right? Or to be perceived as knowledgeable in his field. He also had a few family difficulties, right? Trying to help his mom. He was from a one parent family, and making sure that his mom was okay was important to him, right? So he thought about her a lot. He also had a critical juncture. In this case, he did change a major, but it had relatively very little impact. And he did improve his GPA even after the change. And it's probably, because it was a choice that he made, but it was not necessarily one that was done because of necessity, but one because he thought it would improve his employability options later on, or his employment later on, and his outcomes. So let's look now at Robert's hindrances, right? So in blue, we see that he did not feel academically prepared for a CS major. We also see in dark purple that he was plagued with financial issues throughout college. We see in mustard yellow, there's this HIV diagnosis, which was a critical juncture, and also that he was sick, every semester thereafter in pink. In orange, we know that he had family problems. Once they found out what was going on, family talks and those things happen. Frankly, given these obstacles, I find it a huge achievement that he was able to graduate. So I mean, huge kudos to him. And we know that he is getting paid second highest next to Aaron compared to his peers. So there's a lot to say about that. So a few final thoughts. Backtracking is a useful tool, right? For all 4 types of institutional researchers, whether they be academic researchers, campus authorities, accountability technicians, or program evaluators. And so how can backtracking help? What are things that you hopefully saw in the presentation that shows promise, right, for how these data, these findings can be used to improve student experiences, pathways, and help them navigate the pipeline. Well, we have with backtracking an effective strategy to understand student outcomes, right? We also have contextualized data for an institution, contextualized to an institution, contextualized to a program, contextualized to specific students, right? And what they experienced. It allows us to capture longitudinal student data, right? So we are only interviewing them once, we are surveying them once, but we have maybe even a decade worth of institutional research data to accompany much of the inquiry that we're doing and that we're building with students. The next, it can be used to improve organizational policies, practices, and decision making, right? So in student affairs, it can affect academic advising, how we look at these stops, drops, low GPAs, when to target students, when to intervene, how to intervene. We can look at underserved students and underrepresented populations, interventions that seem to work, what they did to improve their coursework, whether it was mentors, those who, they would feel comfortable speaking to. What are those interventions? And clearly we can find those out the more that we interview to saturation and find out what's going on with those students in particular. Academic affairs, we can improve curricula. We can look at how we can recruit students into certain majors and help them appropriately. And experiential and informal learning, the importance of internships, jobs and majors, networking, employer engagement, etc. Right now, we don't have much as it relates to that. Some institutions, I know at Florida State, we are trying to capture students' jobs and where they go, their internships, so that we have some kind of record, but students don't always divulge that type of information. But clearly it is important, especially in certain fields where your ability to feel comfortable in that field and pursue that field may well impact whether you're going to actually get a position in field or not. So, in conclusion here, I'd just like to take a moment to acknowledge our awesome project team with Marsha Martis, who is our PI, our principal investigator. I'm the co-PI of the project. Of course, you all know Rick Burnett, who has really been important in helping us to look at ways in which to bring together IR, right, with the thoughts that we have for this project and visualize it in such a way that it can impact decision making. And then E. Brandery, Associate Dean at the College of Communication. He's our outreach specialist, right? So he helps us to reach the students, whether it be by email, developing a social media campaign to reach them faster and also get information out to them and also receive that information much faster. So again, this is a huge team. It takes an extraordinary effort, but it's a very effective team, and so glad to be working with them. And of course, if you have any questions, we want to thank you for joining our presentation today. Feel free to ask those questions for a few more minutes in chat if you have time. And on behalf of all of us, thank you so much for attending the presentation today. Enjoy the rest of AIR Forum. Thanks.